The Mafia boss hadn't been back to the mountain house in over 10 years. It was meant to stay forgotten. No guards, no staff, no memories worth keeping. So when he turned the rusted key and pushed the door open that night, he expected dust, silence, emptiness. Instead, he heard a child cough. His body stiffened. A light flickered deeper inside the house. Footsteps. Small ones. He moved slowly down the hallway, heart pounding harder than it ever did in a gunfight. Then he saw them. A woman stood protectively in front of two children, fear written all over her face. They were thin, cold, exhausted. "We didn't know anyone lived here," she whispered. "My husband died last winter. We had nowhere else to go." The Mafia boss looked around. The fireplace was lit, blankets folded neatly. A house that had been abandoned for a decade was alive again. One of the children looked up at him and asked, "Sir, are we in trouble?" In that moment, the most feared man in the city realized this wasn't his house anymore. It was someone's last hope. Stay with me until the end, because the decision he makes next in that mountain home will change all of their lives forever. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. Vincent Torino had built his empire on fear. For 23 years, his name alone made grown men tremble. Business owners paid protection money without being asked. Rival families crossed the street when they saw his car approaching. Even the police knew better than to dig too deep into his operations. But standing in that doorway, staring at a terrified mother clutching her children, Vincent felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. His chest tightened, not from anger or adrenaline, but from something else entirely. Something that made his hands shake in a way that no enemy ever could. The woman's name was Elena Vasquez, 32 years old. Her husband Miguel had died in a construction accident 8 months earlier. No insurance, no savings, just medical bills that devoured what little they had left. Elena worked 3 part-time jobs, but it wasn't enough. Never enough. When the eviction notice came, she had exactly $47 to her name and 2 hungry children who asked why Mommy cried at night. That's when she remembered the stories. Local rumors about an abandoned mansion high up in the mountains. A place where some rich guy used to live but never came back. Empty for years, they said. Just sitting there, forgotten. Elena wasn't a criminal. She'd never even gotten a parking ticket. But desperation makes people do things they never thought possible. So one freezing February night, she broke a window, climbed inside with her 5-year-old daughter Sophia and 3-year-old son Carlos. The house was a palace compared to the cramped apartment they'd lost. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers covered in dust, a kitchen bigger than their entire former living room. Most importantly, it had heat, running water. A roof that didn't leak. Elena told herself it would just be temporary. A few weeks to get back on her feet, find better work, save some money. She'd leave everything exactly as she found it. But weeks turned into months. The children started laughing again. Sophia drew pictures at the big dining room table. Carlos took his first real bath in the enormous marble tub. Elena found odd jobs in the nearby mountain town, telling neighbors she was house-sitting for a friend. She kept the place immaculate, cleaner than it had ever been. Fixed broken things with supplies from the hardware store. Even planted a small garden behind the house, growing vegetables to stretch their food budget. For the first time since Miguel died, Elena felt like she could breathe. Vincent had only come to the mountain house that night because his lawyer needed him to sign papers. The property was being sold to developers who planned to tear it down and build condos. He figured he'd take one last look, grab anything valuable he'd forgotten, and never think about the place again. The house held too many memories. His father had built it in the 70s as a retreat from city life. Vincent spent summers there as a boy, fishing in the lake, hiking the trails, feeling almost normal, before he understood what the family business really meant. Before he learned that his last name came with a price. His father died when Vincent was 19. A rival family's message delivered with bullets. That's when Vincent discovered he had a choice: run away and spend his life looking over his shoulder, or become someone so dangerous that others would do the running instead. He chose power, he chose fear, and he was very, very good at it. But success in his world came with sacrifices. No wife, because loving someone made you vulnerable. No children, because they could be used against you. No real friends, because trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. The mountain house became a painful reminder of the life he'd given up. So he locked it away, just like he locked away every other part of himself that felt too human. Now, watching Elena try to shield her children with her own body, Vincent saw something that shook him to his core. This woman was willing to die for these kids. She had nothing. No money, no power, no weapons. But she had something he'd forgotten existed. She had everything to lose. "Please," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible, "don't hurt them. Take me if you want, but please don't hurt my children." Sophia peeked out from behind her mother's legs. She had dark eyes and pigtails tied with ribbons that had seen better days. In her small hand, she clutched a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. "Mama, who is that man?" she asked. Carlos, barely more than a toddler, didn't understand the danger. He pointed at Vincent and smiled. Actually smiled, like he was greeting a neighbor. Vincent's throat went dry. When was the last time someone had smiled at him? Really smiled, without fear or calculation behind it. "How long have you been here?" Vincent asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Elena flinched at the sound, but answered honestly. 6 months. I know it was wrong. I know we're trespassing, but we had nowhere else to go. I can pay you back. I have a job now. It'll take time, but I can pay for the utilities, the food, everything we used." Vincent looked around the room with new eyes. The house didn't just look lived in, it looked loved. Fresh flowers in a vase on the mantel, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, the smell of something homemade lingering in the air. This place had been dead for 10 years. Now it was breathing again. "You fixed the heating system," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded quickly. "The pilot light was out, and some of the pipes were loose. I found instructions online. I didn't break anything. I promise." Vincent almost smiled. Almost. This woman had done more to maintain his property in 6 months than his property management company had done in a decade. "And the garden outside? I'll dig it up before we leave. Put everything back the way it was." "The way it was," Vincent repeated slowly. He thought about that. Dust-covered furniture, broken fixtures, windows that hadn't been opened in years. A beautiful house slowly rotting from neglect. His phone buzzed. A text from his lieutenant asking about the property sale. The developers were eager to close the deal. They'd offered $3 million for the land alone. Easy money for something he never used anyway. Vincent stared at the screen, then looked back at the family huddled in his living room. Elena was still trembling, but she kept her chin raised, proud even in her terror. Sophia had started humming quietly to comfort herself. Carlos had found a toy truck somewhere and was rolling it across the marble floor, completely oblivious to the tension. This was supposed to be simple. Call the police. Have them arrested for trespassing. Sign the papers. Walk away $3 million richer. But as Vincent watched this little boy play with his truck, making soft engine noises, something cracked inside his chest. Something he'd spent decades building walls around. Vincent set his phone down without answering the text. The developers could wait. "What's your name?" he asked the woman. "Elena," she whispered. "Elena Vasquez. These are my children, Sophia and Carlos." Vincent nodded slowly. In his world, names mattered. They meant family connections, debts owed, enemies made. But these names meant nothing to his network. These people existed outside his dangerous universe entirely. "Elena," he repeated, testing how it sounded. "How did your husband die?" "Construction accident." Her voice cracked. "A beam fell. He was trying to finish the job before winter hit. The company said it wasn't their fault. No compensation, nothing. Vincent had ordered men killed for far less than what that construction company had done to this family. But Elena didn't want revenge. She just wanted to survive. "Are you going to call the police?" Elena asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Vincent could end this with a phone call. Have them removed, arrested, out of his life forever. It would be clean, simple, the way he handled every problem. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Sofia clutched that worn rabbit. Maybe it was how Carlos had gone back to playing with his truck, trusting that the adults would figure things out. Or maybe it was the realization that Elena had asked about police, not knowing she was talking to someone who considered them a minor inconvenience at best. "No," Vincent said finally. "I'm not calling anyone." Elena's shoulders sagged with relief, but her eyes remained wary. She was smart enough to know this wasn't over. "But you need to leave," Vincent continued. "I understand." Elena's voice was steady now, accepting. "How long do we have?" Vincent looked around the room again. 6 months ago, this place was a tomb. Now a child's laughter echoed off walls that had known only silence. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent decades making homes into crime scenes. Elena had turned his abandoned house back into a home. "Pack your things," he said. "I'll be back tomorrow morning." Elena nodded, gathering her children closer. "Thank you for not calling the police. And I'm sorry. I really am sorry for taking something that wasn't ours." Vincent turned to leave, but Sofia's small voice stopped him. "Mister, are you the man who owns all the pretty rooms?" He looked down at her. Those dark eyes held no fear now, just curiosity. When was the last time someone had called anything of his pretty? "Yes," he said simply. "It's a really nice house," Sofia said solemnly. "We took good care of it." Vincent's chest tightened again. "I can see that." As he walked back to his car, Vincent's phone rang. His Lieutenant Marco, probably wondering about the property deal. "Boss, the developers are asking about tomorrow's meeting. You want me to handle the paperwork?" Vincent sat in his car, staring back at the house. Warm light glowed in the windows. He could see Elena moving around inside, probably starting to pack their few belongings. "Push the meeting back," Vincent said. "How long?" Vincent didn't answer immediately. He watched as Elena appeared in the kitchen window, washing dishes that would soon be abandoned. Even now, facing eviction, she was cleaning up after herself. "Boss, how long should I delay them? I'll call you tomorrow." Vincent hung up and drove down the mountain, his mind racing. He had rules that had kept him alive for over 2 decades. Never show weakness. Never get emotionally involved. Never let anyone get close enough to matter. But those rules felt different now. Heavier. That night, Vincent couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, looking out at the city he controlled through fear and violence. Somewhere down there, families were sleeping safely in their beds because his organization maintained a certain order. But they didn't sleep safely because of kindness or protection. They slept because everyone was too afraid to disturb the peace he enforced. Elena didn't know who he was. To her, he was just another landlord, another person with power over her family's fate. She had no idea that men twice her size crossed the street to avoid disappointing him. Vincent thought about his father's funeral, 23 years ago, the last time he'd felt truly vulnerable. He remembered standing beside that casket, making a promise to never let anyone hurt him the way his father had been hurt, to never care about anything enough that losing it would break him. He'd kept that promise, built an empire on it. But watching Elena protect her children had reminded him of something he'd forgotten. His father hadn't been weak for loving his family. His father had been strongest when he had something worth protecting. Morning came too soon. Vincent drove back up the mountain, expecting to find an empty house. Instead, he found Elena loading cardboard boxes into an ancient pickup truck that looked like it might not make it down the winding road. Sofia sat on the front steps, still holding her rabbit. Carlos was crying, not understanding why they had to leave the place with the big bathtub and the warm rooms. "The truck won't start," Elena said, when she saw Vincent approaching. Her voice was steady, but he could see the panic in her eyes. "The battery's dead. I called for a tow, but they want money up front." Vincent looked at the truck. It was older than both of Elena's children combined. Even if it started, it wouldn't get them far. Where were you planning to go? He asked. Elena's face flushed. There's a shelter downtown. They have a waiting list, but maybe if we show up early. A shelter. Vincent thought about the shelters he'd seen in his territory. Overcrowded. Dangerous. Not a place for children who drew pictures and played with toy trucks. The truck's not your biggest problem, Vincent said. Even if it ran, you'd never make it down the mountain in this weather. As if to prove his point, snow began falling. Not the gentle dusting they'd had yesterday, but heavy flakes that meant serious accumulation. Elena looked at the sky, then at her children, then back at Vincent. What do you suggest? Vincent surprised himself with his answer. You stay put until the storm passes. Elena blinked. I don't understand. Neither did Vincent, if he was being honest. But looking at Carlos trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue, Vincent realized he wasn't ready to watch them disappear into the city's chaos. Not yet. The roads will be impassable within an hour, Vincent said. It's not safe to travel with children in this weather. But you said we had to leave. I said you had to leave. I didn't say when. Elena studied his face, trying to read something there that Vincent wasn't sure he understood himself. One more night? She asked carefully. Vincent nodded. Until the road's clear. But as he drove away for the second time, Vincent knew he was lying to himself. The weather was just an excuse. The real storm was happening inside him, and he had no idea how to navigate it. The snow fell harder, blanketing the mountain in white silence. And for the first time in over 20 years, Vincent Torino found himself hoping for a blizzard. The blizzard lasted 3 days. 3 days that stretched into something Vincent had never experienced before. Not just weather, but a complete suspension of the world he knew. On the morning of the second day, Vincent found himself driving back up the mountain. He told himself it was to check on the property, make sure pipes hadn't frozen, basic maintenance. But the truth sat heavier in his chest with every mile. He was worried about them. When he knocked on his own front door, Sophia answered. She'd gotten comfortable in those 48 hours, no longer hiding behind her mother's legs. The snowman is back, she announced to the house. Vincent almost smiled. Snowman. Better than some of the names people called him in the city. Elena appeared in the doorway, flour dusting her hands. She'd been baking. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, mixing with wood smoke from the fireplace. I didn't expect you back so soon, she said. Roads are still blocked, Vincent replied, which wasn't entirely true. His driver had made it up just fine. Wanted to make sure the heating system was holding up. Elena stepped aside to let him in. It's working perfectly, though I did have to adjust the thermostat. Carlos runs cold, and Sophia kicks off her blankets at night. Vincent nodded, pretending to inspect a radiator while actually watching Carlos stack wooden blocks in the corner. The boy had found them somewhere in the house. Vincent remembered playing with those same blocks 30 years ago. Where did those come from? Vincent asked. Upstairs closet, Elena said quickly. I hope that's okay. He was getting restless, and I found them in what looked like it used to be a child's room. Vincent's jaw tightened. His old room. The one his father had decorated with planes and cars, back when Vincent thought he might grow up to be a pilot instead of what he became. He can play with them, Vincent said quietly. Elena relaxed. Thank you. I know this situation is strange for you, having strangers in your house. We're trying to stay out of the way. But they weren't staying out of the way. They were everywhere. Sophia's drawings now covered the refrigerator door. Carlos had left his toy truck on the coffee table. Elena's coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, still warm. The house felt lived in, loved, like it had when Vincent was 7 years old and thought the world was a safe place. The bread smells good, Vincent found himself saying. Elena brightened. Would you like some? I made extra. Force of habit from feeding Miguel's construction crew. Before Vincent could decline, she was cutting thick slices, spreading them with butter and honey. She set a plate in front of him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Vincent couldn't remember the last time someone had served him food without fear. His usual meals came from restaurants where the owners knew exactly who he was. Service born from terror, not hospitality. This bread was different, made with hands that shook from cold, not fear. It's good, Vincent said, and meant it. Elena smiled, actually smiled at him. My grandmother's recipe. Miguel always said it could fix anything. Could it fix your husband's accident? The question came out harsher than Vincent intended. Elena's smile faded. No, nothing could fix that. But it helped with the nights when grief felt too heavy to carry alone. Vincent set down the bread. He'd killed men for saying less personal things to him, but Elena's honesty cut through his defenses like they were made of paper. I'm sorry, he said. About your husband. Thank you. Elena sat across from him at the table. He was a good man. Worked 2 jobs to keep us fed. Never complained, even when his back ached so bad he could barely stand. Vincent thought about the construction company that had refused compensation. In his world, that kind of injustice had solutions. Permanent ones. The company that employed him, Vincent said carefully. They offered nothing? Nothing. Elena's voice hardened. Said Miguel should have been more careful. Like he chose to get crushed by a falling beam. What was the company name? Elena looked at him strangely. Why? Vincent realized he'd leaned forward, his voice taking on the tone he used when gathering information for retaliation. He forced himself to sit back. Just curious. He lied. Brennan Construction. But it doesn't matter now. Miguel's gone and no amount of money will bring him back. Vincent filed the name away. Brennan Construction. He'd remember that. Sophia appeared at his elbow, holding up a piece of paper. Look what I drew. Vincent examined the crayon drawing. A big house with smoke coming from the chimney. Stick figures standing in front, smiling. A man, a woman, 2 children. That's us, Sophia explained proudly. Me and Carlos and Mama and you. Me? Vincent's throat went dry. You live here too, right? In the pretty house? Elena reached for the drawing. Sophia, honey? This isn't his home. We're just visiting. But Sophia shook her head firmly. It is his home. He has the key. Vincent stared at the drawing. When was the last time someone had included him in their family picture? When was the last time anyone had drawn him as anything other than a monster? Can I keep this? He asked Sophia. The little girl beamed. Really? You want my picture? I do. Vincent folded the drawing carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. Elena watched him with an expression he couldn't read. That afternoon, while Elena napped and the children played quietly, Vincent found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He called his lawyer. I need information on a construction company, Vincent said. Brennan Construction, everything, safety violations, insurance claims, financial records, planning an investment, boss? Something like that. Vincent hung up and stared out at the snow. Elena was right. No amount of money would bring back her husband. But money could ensure Brennan Construction faced consequences for their negligence. Justice took many forms. Later that evening, Vincent found Elena in the kitchen washing dishes. Carlos was already asleep upstairs. Sophia sat at the table coloring another picture with fierce concentration. You don't have to do that, Vincent said, watching Elena scrub a pan. I know, but it feels wrong to leave messes for someone else to clean. Vincent had staff for cleaning, people who came and went without him ever learning their names. But Elena washed dishes like it mattered, like taking care of things was just part of who she was. Why did you choose this house? Vincent asked. There are other empty places in these mountains. Elena paused, her hands still in the soapy water. Honestly, it was the first place we tried where the door wasn't locked. But after we got inside, after we spent our first night here, it felt different. Different how? Elena turned to face him, drying her hands on a towel. Like it had been waiting for us. I know that sounds crazy. It didn't sound crazy to Vincent. This house had been waiting for something. For 10 years, it had sat empty, slowly forgetting what it meant to be a home. Elena and her children had reminded it. Mama, Sophia called from the table. How do you spell grateful? Grateful, Elena spelled out. What are you writing, sweetheart? A thank you letter. To the snowman. Vincent's chest tightened. You don't need to thank me. Sophia looked up at him with those serious dark eyes. Daddy always said when someone is kind to you, you say thank you, even if they're scary at first. Am I scary? Vincent asked. Sophia considered this carefully. A little, but Carlos isn't scared of you anymore, and Mama stopped shaking when you brought the firewood yesterday. Vincent had forgotten about the firewood. Elena's supply had been running low, so he'd restocked the pile without mentioning it. Such a small thing, but to Sophia, it mattered enough to write a thank you letter. I'll treasure that letter, Vincent told her. That night, Vincent made a decision that went against every survival instinct he'd developed. He didn't leave, didn't return to his penthouse apartment with its bulletproof windows and armed security. Instead, he slept in his father's old study, surrounded by books and memories he'd spent decades avoiding. For the first time in 20 years, Vincent Torino slept without a gun under his pillow, because for the first time in 20 years, he felt safe. The next morning brought clear skies and passable roads. The storm had ended. Elena knew it too. Vincent found her packing again, moving with the efficient sadness of someone who'd learned not to get too attached to temporary situations. The shelter called, she said, without looking at him. They have space for us. We can move in this afternoon. Vincent watched Carlos playing with the wooden blocks, building a tower that kept falling down. The boy laughed each time it collapsed, immediately starting over. What if you didn't go to the shelter? Vincent asked. Elena stopped packing. What do you mean? I mean, what if you stayed here? The words hung in the air between them. Elena stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. Stay here? In your house? It's just sitting empty otherwise. Has been for 10 years. Will be again after you leave. Elena shook her head. We can't do that. We can't just live in someone else's house. Why not? Because it's not ours. Because you could change your mind tomorrow and we'd be back where we started. Because I won't raise my children on charity. Vincent understood pride. He'd built his entire life around it. But he also understood desperation. And Elena's pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. What if it wasn't charity? Vincent asked slowly. What if it was a job? Elena frowned. What kind of job? Vincent's mind raced. He couldn't tell her the truth about who he was, what he did for a living, but he could offer something that would let her keep her dignity. Property management. The house needs someone to maintain it. Keep it clean, handle repairs, make sure everything works properly. I don't know anything about property management. You fixed the heating system. You've kept this place in better condition than it's been in years. You know more than you think. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Sophia had stopped coloring to listen. Even Carlos seemed to sense the importance of what was being discussed. What would that pay? Elena asked carefully. Vincent named a figure that was more than generous, but not so high that it would seem suspicious. Enough for Elena to live with dignity. Enough to give her children the stability they desperately needed. That's too much for housekeeping, Elena said. It's not just housekeeping. It's being here year-round, handling emergencies, making sure the place doesn't fall apart again. Elena looked around the kitchen, at the drawings on the refrigerator, at her children who had started to believe in permanence again. Why? She asked simply. Vincent could have given her a dozen practical reasons. Tax benefits, property maintenance, investment protection. All true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that Sophia had included him in her family drawing. The whole truth was that Carlos smiled when he saw Vincent coming. The whole truth was that Elena had served him homemade bread without expecting anything in return. The whole truth was that this house had been dead for 10 years, and they had brought it back to life. Because, Vincent said quietly, some things are worth more than money. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her children, at the home they'd accidentally created, at the man who was offering them something that seemed too good to be true. If we stay, she said slowly, there have to be rules, boundaries. This is still your house. Vincent nodded. What kind of boundaries? Privacy. You tell us when you're coming up. We stay out of your way when you're here. And if it doesn't work out, if you change your mind, you give us 30 days' notice. Agreed, Vincent said immediately. Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Are you sure about this? Really sure? Vincent thought about his empty apartment in the city, his sterile office, his life built on fear and isolation. Then he looked at Carlos, who had given up on his block tower and was now driving his toy truck around the legs of Vincent's chair, making soft engine noises. I'm sure, Vincent said. Sophia jumped up from her chair and hugged his leg, nearly knocking him off balance. Thank you, Snowman, she whispered against his knee. Thank you for letting us stay in the pretty house. Vincent's hand found its way to the top of her head, fingers gentle in her dark hair. In his world, physical contact meant violence, but this felt different. This felt like something he'd forgotten existed. This felt like family. As Elena unpacked their boxes for the second time that week, Vincent realized he'd just made the most dangerous decision of his life. Not because of rival families or police investigations or business complications. Dangerous because for the first time in decades, he had something to lose. Something that mattered more than power or money or reputation. He had a reason to come home. Vincent Torino walked into that mountain house expecting to find nothing but dust and memories. Instead, he found Elena, Sophia, and Carlos, a family that had turned his forgotten property into a home. What started as a simple trespassing case became something neither of them saw coming. A hardened Mafia boss discovered that the most dangerous thing wasn't rival families or police investigations. It was having something worth protecting. Elena found stability for her children and a man who saw past her desperation to her strength. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen when we least expect them. What would you have done in Vincent's position? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more incredible stories like this one.